John Steinbeck Sr. worked at the milling company. He met Olive, who probably was teaching on this location. We're not exactly sure, but we think probably so. And you can imagine him walking down here or her walking that way. And they met and they married in 1890. And that led to the Steinbeck family. They didn't stay in King City very long, but the Hamilton family was from down in, near Wild Horse Canyon, and actually in Hamilton Canyon. And when John Steinbeck wrote his book, East of Eden, he mentioned King City 48 times. And even though the story is fictional, the references are very accurate to Steinbeck's family. If you haven't read it, it's the ultimate book of good versus evil. And it is quite the epic. And so today we have our friend Steve Wilson, who is going to do a short reading from chapter 14 of East of Eden that talks about what life was as a school teacher a long time ago. So could you please welcome Steve Wilson?
Will this be necessary?
Yes.
No, I got it. Thank you. As she said, school teachers in the schoolhouse. The country schools were the centers of culture then. The Protestant churches in the towns were fighting for their existence in a country where they were newcomers. The Catholic Church, first on the scene and deeply dug in, sat in comfortable tradition, while the missions were gradually abandoned and their roofs fell in and the pigeons roosted on their stripped altars. The library, in Latin and Spanish, of the San Antonio mission was thrown into a granary where the rats ate off the sheepskin bindings. In the country, the repository of art and science was the school teacher, and the school teacher shielded and carried the torch of learning and of beauty. The schoolhouse was the meeting place for music, for debate. The polls were set in the schoolhouse for elections, social life, whether it was the crowning of a May Queen, the eulogy to a dead president, or an all-night dance, could be held nowhere else. And the teacher was not only an intellectual paragon and a social leader, but also the matrimonial catch of the countryside. A family could indeed walk proudly if a son married the school teacher. Her children were presumed to have the intellectual advantages both inherited and conditioned. The daughters of Samuel Hamilton were not destined to become work-destroyed farm wives. They were handsome girls, and they carried with them the glow of their descent from the kings of Ireland. They had a pride that transcended their poverty. No one ever thought of them as deserving pity. Samuel raised a distinctly superior breed. They were better read, better bred than most of their contemporaries. To all of them, Samuel communicated his love of learning and set them apart from the prideful ignorance of their time. Olive Hamilton became a teacher. That meant she left home at 15, went to live in Salinas, where she would go to secondary school. At 17, she took county board examinations, which covered all the arts and sciences. And at 18, she was teaching at Peachtree. In her school, there were pupils older than she was. It required great tact to be a school teacher, to keep order among the big, undisciplined boys without pistol or bullwhip was difficult and dangerous business. Olive Hamilton had not only to teach everything, but to all ages. Very few youths were past the 8th grade in those days, and what with farm duties, it took some of them 14 or 15 years to do it. Olive also had to practice a rudimentary medicine, for there were constant accidents. She sewed up knife cuts after a fight in the yard and in the schoolyard. When a small barefooted boy was bitten by a rattlesnake, it was her duty to suck his toe to draw the poison out. She taught reading, to the first grade and algebra to the 8th. She led the singing and acted as critic of literature, wrote the social notes that went weekly to the Salinas journals. In addition, the whole social life was in her hands. Not only graduation exercise, but dances, meetings, debates, chorals, Christmas and May Day, festivals, patriotic exudations on Decoration Day and the 4th of July. She was on the election board and headed and held together all charities. It was far from an easy job, and it had duties and obligations beyond belief. The teacher had no private life. She had to watch jealously for any weakness of character. She could not board with one family for more than one term, for that would cause jealousy. A family gained social ascendancy by boarding the teacher. And if a marriageable son belonged to the family where she boarded, a proposal was automatic. And if there were more than one claimant, there were vicious fights over her hand. The Agita boys, 3 of them, nearly clawed each other to death over all the hand. Teachers rarely last very long in country schools. The work was so hard and the proposals so constant. They married in a very short time. This was, of course, all that Hamilton determined she would not take. She did not share the intellectual enthusiasms of her father, but the time she spent in Salinas determined her not to become a ranch wife. She wanted to live in a town, perhaps not so big as Salinas, but at least not a crossroads. In Salinas, Olive had experienced niceties of living, the choir, investments, altar guild, bean suppers at the Episcopal Church. She had partaken of the arts, road companies of plays, and even operas with their magic of promise of an aromatic world outside. She'd gone to parties, played charades, competed in poetry writings, joined a chorus and orchestra. Salinas had tempted her. There, she could go to a party, dress for the party, and come home in the same dress, instead of rolling her clothes in a saddlebag, riding 10 miles, then unrolling and pressing. Busy though she was with her teaching, Olive longed for the metropolitan life. And when a young man who had built a flour mill in King City sued properly for her hand, she accepted, subject to a long and secret engagement. John Steinbeck, ladies and gentlemen. John Journeyman.
Yeah. Thank you, Steve. I really appreciate that.